A little sparrow once built her home in the hollow of an old oak, where the bark folded inward like a hand cupping water. For 3 seasons she lined it, with feathers, with dry grasses, with a strand of red thread she had pulled from a clothesline on a windless afternoon, with the soft down of a thistle that had drifted past her in the rain. Each twig was chosen, each piece remembered. She would wake at first light and watch the sun rise through the same small gap in the leaves, and she believed, as small creatures often do, that this gap, this oak, this hollow, was the whole shape of her life. Then came the night the wind changed. It came slowly at first, the way grief always does. The leaves above her turned their backs. The branches began to speak in a low voice she had never heard them use before. By the time the rain arrived, she understood that the oak was no longer holding her. She was holding on to the oak. When the lightning split the trunk in two, she fell. She fell through wet air and torn leaves, and her own astonishment. And when she landed, she did not know which way was the sky. The clothesline thread was gone. The thistledown was gone. The hollow was gone. The shape of her life was lying on the ground in pieces. For 3 days she did not fly. She walked through wet grass. She drank from puddles that tasted of bark and ruin. An old crow watched her from a fence post and said nothing, which was the kindest thing he could have said. On the 4th morning, without thinking, she opened her wings, and the wind, the same wind that had broken her, lifted her. She flew without direction. She flew because there was nothing else to do. The sky, she discovered, was wider than she remembered, or perhaps she had only ever looked at one small piece of it. She passed over a river she had never seen. She passed over a field where horses lifted their heads to watch her go. She passed over a small house with a chimney that smelled of bread, and a child at the window who pointed up at her and laughed. And then, in the late afternoon, she came to a place she did not recognize at all. It was a stone wall, old, half-fallen, covered in ivy, and in one of its crevices, between 2 warm stones, was a hollow shaped almost like the one she had lost. Almost. Not quite. The light came in from a different angle. The wind made a different sound here. She could see, from inside, not one gap in the leaves, but a whole open field, and the slow shape of the sun making its way across it. She did not build right away. She sat on the wall for a long time, and she let herself be sad. She thought of the oak. She thought of the red thread. She thought of all the mornings she would never have again in the place she had loved. And then, slowly, carefully, the way one learns to breathe again after weeping, she began to gather. A twig, a blade of grass, a feather not her own. Years later, when she had become an old bird herself, lining a hollow for what she suspected was the last time, an even older swallow landed beside her on the wall. "The wind does not break us to be cruel," he said, looking out across the field. "It breaks us to show us we were never as small as our first nest." She did not answer. She only kept lining. The young birds, when they came after their own storms, did not always understand this. They arrived trembling, with bits of moss and string still clinging to their wings, and they asked her, "What do I do now?" She never told them. She only sat beside them while the world they had built lay in pieces on the wet ground below. And after a while, when they were ready, she would simply spread her wings and let the wind take her and trust that they would see. Because the wind that breaks you is the same wind that carries you, and every hollow, sooner or later, is only practice for the next one. We spend so much of our lives believing that the first thing we build is the only thing we are. We line it with everything we love, and we mistake the nest for the sky. But the wind has never once asked our permission. It takes the oak and the thread and the small gap of light we thought was the whole morning. And for a while we lie on the wet ground in pieces, certain that nothing will ever hold us again. And then, on some 4th morning we did not plan for, we open the wings we forgot we had. The loss was never the punishment, it was the door. So if the wind is in your branches tonight, if something you built is coming apart in the dark, be gentle with yourself and wait for the fourth morning. The sky was always wider than the peace you knew. The wind that breaks you is the same wind that carries you, and every hollow, sooner or later, is only practice for the next one.